Welcome to the AEN Stories channel.
They say baseball is a kid's game played by grown men with bills and lower back pain. If that's true, then I'm the guy who kept the dugout stocked with sunflower seeds and awkward life lessons. Name's Mike Sanders, 42, high school baseball coach in a town where Friday night football thinks it's a religion and baseball is the church basement where the real community happens. I teach P.E. I chalk lines straighter than most people live their lives, and I can coil a hose into a circle so perfect you'd think geometry owes me money. For most of my adult life, the field was the place I felt most myself. That, and home, with Anna. Anna teaches biology. Or taught, past tense comes later. She's the kind of person who can make a kid care about mitochondria by saying the word like it owes her lunch money. Dark hair, sharper wit, the steady hand that used to pass me travel mugs labeled Coach Fuel on game days. We didn't have kids, we had a house full of sports equipment and annotated lab manuals. Our weekends were farmers market apples, lesson planning at the kitchen table, and occasionally me trying to convince her that an infield fly is absolutely fascinating if you think about it philosophically. When you're a coach, you get used to reading slums, how a kid's swing gets long when his head gets loud. I should have recognized the slump at home. First it was the jokes. "You still playing your little games?" she'd say, smiling sharp. Or she'd roll her eyes when I'd come home sunburned and hoarse and giddy because our sophomore shortstop finally learned to go opera like he meant it. "It's just baseball," she'd say, like I'd been worshipping a traffic cone. "It's not just baseball," I'd reply, which, in hindsight, is exactly what a man in denial would say. Then came the late nights. "Department meetings," she said. "Extra tutoring. Committee this, initiative that." Sometimes she'd come home smelling like the lounge coffee and victory. Other times like the kind of perfume you wear when you want the universe to pay attention. "Everything good?" I'd ask, rinsing dinner plates. "Everything's fine," she'd say, a little too fast. "We can't all spend our days teaching kids how to swing at air." I tried not to flinch. Words are like pitches, most you let go by, some you foul off, and a few you wish you ducked. I kept coaching. Kept lining up bucket after bucket of baseballs for our JV hitters. Kept reminding kids the game doesn't love you back, it loves your work. Kept telling them that failing 7 times out of 10 makes you a Hall of Famer, and isn't that a great metaphor for life, and they'd look at me like I'd assigned homework to a Saturday. Then, one Wednesday in March, late, I stopped by O'Malley's, the teacher's bar, where the burgers are good and the music is always 5 years behind. I wasn't there to drink, I'm a 2-beer man who likes to remember who won. I was there because the copier in the coach's office had finally given up and I needed 20 permission slips copied by 7 a.m. And O'Malley's is right across from Copy King and makes waiting for collated miracles tolerable. That's when I saw them, Anna and Principal Davenport at a corner table. Not across from each other like colleagues. Side by side like a whispered plan. He's got the smooth kind of smile that photographs well and the handshake of a man who practices in mirrors. She laughed at something he said and touched his wrist, and I knew. Not everything, not the logistics, not the definitions. But enough. I watched exactly long enough to be sure and then stared very hard at a framed Cubs jersey like it had asked me to explain gravity. My first thought was to storm over and say something dramatic and cinematic that would get me fired twice. Instead, I left with my copies and my heart feeling like a foul tip off the thumb. At home, later, she breezed in at midnight with a "sorry, meetings ran long," and I said with Davenport, "Because sometimes your mouth beats your brain to the plate." She blinked once, and in that blink I saw the decision: deny, deflect, or double down. "Don't be jealous, Mike," she said, tone shifting into something cold. "Some of us are trying to build real careers." "Coaching isn't a real career?" I asked, steady as I could. "News to the kids who count on it." "Please," she said, waving a hand like she was shooing a flyaway thought. "You stand in dirt and shout at teenagers. He runs a school." I stood in that kitchen barefoot on tile that suddenly felt like ice and said nothing because nothing seemed both sufficient and safe. A couple days later, in the staff lot, she found me coiling that hose into a perfect circle and dropped the line like a bunt with bad intentions. Look, Mike. He's going to promote me. Department chair. Real impact. And you? She eyed the bat bag over my shoulder. You're just out here waving a bat. I'm teaching kids how to be honest, I said. Sometimes that looks like waving a bat. She smirked. You keep playing your little game, she said. I'll go do something that matters. You ever hear something snap and not know whether it was inside or out? I kept smiling like we were discussing weather, then watched her walk toward the building like it owed her a runway. I was wrecked, is what I was. I went home that night, stared at the TV, didn't watch a second of it. At school, I fumbled through practice. Dropped my phone twice. Called a kid by his older brother's name. When you're a coach, you live on routine. Mine felt like it had termites. I thought about quitting. Thought about packing my office into cardboard and leaving the keys on Davenport's desk with a note that said, "Enjoy the dirt." Then Saturday morning hit. I went to the field early because the only thing louder than the hurt in my head is a mower. The sun was low, the grass wet, the world briefly simple. I watched our smallest kid, Cooper, all elbows and optimism, bike up with a bat twice his size. "Coach," he called, dropping the kickstand like a mic. "My mom says if I keep my grades up I can try out next year." "You keep your grades up anyway," I said, tossing him a ball. He whiffed, then grinned like he'd meant to. "Okay," he said. "But the trying out part helps." He jogged home and left me with a thought that landed like a clean throw. If I quit, what do they learn from that? The line formed in my head the way a good pre-game speech does, all at once and with certainty. I'm going to teach them honest ball, even if I have to start by playing it off the field. That's how the lion wakes up in a baseball coach, quietly, with a clipboard. I didn't go all Liam Neeson in the parking lot. I did something scarier, I started paying attention. Real attention. Davenport had been strutting for months, new weight room ribbon cuttings, banners with his photo and the phrase "excellence starts at the top," budget presentations that looked like dead talks for people who think the word stakeholder is foreplay. He was everywhere, in staff emails, in the superintendent's pocket, on the local news when our basketball team made state, a thing he did not coach and did not shoot a single free throw for. And he liked to talk. Oh, did he? I am not a detective. I'm a man who owns more clipboards than suits. But coaching teaches you pattern seeking. Who shows up early? Who adds an extra shuffle step on a throw? Who suddenly hits like they've met a pitching machine named discipline? You read a lot by watching. I watched. And I heard. The custodian told me quietly that Davenport had a habit of fixing maintenance logs before board meetings, repair requests moved around, costs trimmed, notes tweaked to make things look shiny. The attendance secretary showed me how certain athletes' absences adjusted the day before eligibility checks. A math teacher swore he'd submitted an expense reimbursement that somehow reappeared as professional development supplies purchased by Davenport's discretionary fund. On their own? Gripes. Together? A mural that needed better lighting. I started collecting emails, screenshots, copies of purchase orders where prices didn't match the invoices, by enough to matter. Security camera schedules showing Davenport disabling certain hall feeds before after-hours meetings. One of those meetings aligned perfectly with Anna's frequent late-night grading lab reports. The cafeteria manager, bless her fearless heart, told me she'd been asked to shred delivery slips on days when a local business owner provided supplemental catering. She knew a slush fund when she saw one. She also knew better than to say it out loud. Then there was the Booster Club. Ah, the wonderful, chaotic world of parents with checkbooks and opinions. Davenport had charmed them with big promises, new scoreboard, turf in 5 years, team buses that didn't smell like mysteries. Money flowed in. Money flowed out. Records didn't line up. The treasurer, a CPA who had better spreadsheets than I have metaphors, showed me a pattern of transfers into a principal's discretionary student success account that looked more like a things Mike doesn't get to ask about account. I didn't sleep great those weeks. In practice I kept it normal, grounders, backhands, reminders to run through first, not do it. I told jokes I didn't feel. I watched a sophomore finally pull a change-up fair and pretended that the joy I felt didn't share a room with the fear that I was about to set myself on fire in a very public way. At home, Anna alternated between frost and condescension. She began wearing the kind of professionally pretty suits that say I know how meetings end. Once, she stopped in the doorway and watched me wipe down bats like I was polishing the past. "You still doing show and tell with those?" she asked, breezy. "They're tools," I said. "They deserve respect." "Tools," she repeated, like the word was a cousin she didn't claim. "You know, if you spent half as much time on your career as you do on those sticks, you'd be more than this." "More than what?" I asked, even though I knew. "More than a gym teacher who can't let go of high school," she said, and left for a committee dinner. That night I sat at the kitchen table with printouts and sticky notes and highlighters and an old spiral-bound scorebook because it made me feel brave, and I built the case like I'd build a practice plan, step by step, no shortcuts, all reps count. The thing about corruption is it rarely looks like a mustache-twirling villain tossing gold coins into a sack labeled mine. It looks like 1,000 little adjustments in the dark that add up to a daytime theft. You need 1,000 little lights. By the time the school board scheduled its quarterly community forum, I had a baseball coach's version of a binder, cheap, ugly, and undeniable. I told exactly 3 people: the CPA treasurer, who said I'll sit near the aisle, the custodian, who brought his own copies, bless him, and our civics teacher, Mrs. Silverman, who could turn Robert's Rules of Order into a martial art. "Don't grandstand," she advised. "Be clear. Be calm. Make it impossible to misunderstand." The night of the meeting, I wore a suit I try to avoid, too stiff, too much like I'm pretending to be someone who finds ties fun. The auditorium smelled like floor wax and nerves. Davenport stood at the front, sun lamps for teeth, high-fiving donors, greeting parents like a man who thought he'd rehearsed this scene enough times to own it. Anna sat near the front with the department heads, perfectly polished, eyes sliding past me like we were colleagues who once shared a copier and a momentary fondness for the same snack machine. The board did their normal thing. Budgets, enrollment, a PowerPoint about innovations in assessment that made me want to assess an app. Then they opened the floor for public comment. I stood. "Mike Sanders," I said into the mic. "Baseball coach, P.E. teacher, and someone who loves this place enough to clean up after your night games." A ripple of laughter. I kept my breath steady. "I'm here to talk about integrity," I said. "Not the billboard kind, the real one you teach by example." I handed the board copies of my packet. Inside, a summary with dates, 3 key categories: financial irregularities, report falsifications, and misuse of authority, and a stack of documents that would make the word alleged take a long lunch. I spoke slowly. "Clean. No hot sauce. Here you'll see maintenance logs altered prior to audits," I said. "Attendance manipulated for select athletes. Booster funds routed to a discretionary account and used for purchases outside board-approved guidelines. See the scoreboard contract that somehow cost $12,000 more than the vendor invoice. That difference appears here tab, as a consulting fee with no vendor listed." I flipped to the next tab. You'll also see a pattern of security camera outages corresponding with after-hours meetings in the principal's office. The footage gaps align with dates of certain committee dinners. I've included copies of the camera maintenance requests with times. I didn't look at Hannah. My hands didn't shake much. "And lastly," I said, "you'll see emails encouraging staff to reclassify expenses, to wait on entering absence codes until we get our numbers clearer, and one that reads, verbatim, 'Make sure baseball is marked eligible, we need a win this week.'" That last one came the day after 2 players missed classes for a private workout arranged by you can read the name. I let the silence do a lap. "I coach kids to play fair," I said, voice low. "I tell them a win you steal is a loss you carry. I would be the worst kind of hypocrite if I kept my mouth shut now." Davenport laughed. Actually laughed. It was the kind of sound a person makes when they believe the narrative is a trampoline and they will always land upright. "Coach," he said, crossing his arms like they were props, "I appreciate your passion. Unfortunately, What you're waving around is a tangled ball of misunderstandings and out-of-context paperwork. You don't know how administration works. Context is on page 2, I said. And if I'm wrong, I'll happily apologize and run polls for a week. But if I'm right, if I'm even half right, then you owe this community better than a smile and a sweep. A mom in the third row said, "That's right," and then another, and then the Booster Club treasurer stood and said, "I can corroborate line items on pages 9 through 12. She sounded like a verdict. Davenport's grin thinned. Anna stared at me the way a sore loser stares at an ump. "Mike," she said into her mic, voice sugar over knives, "everyone knows you have feelings about administration. But this is embarrassing. You're making a scene because you're jealous. You're a P.E. teacher with a hero complex, and you're dragging good people down because you can't accept that your little game isn't the center of the universe." "Ma'am," the board chair said to Anna gently, "this is public comment. Let's avoid personal attacks." "Respectfully," I said, "the only thing I'm jealous of is the budget line for miscellaneous consultation services. It lives like a raccoon in our accounting. I'd love to know what it eats." The room broke into that kind of laugh that's half relief, half rage. Once a crowd starts tasting truth, they get hungry. The board went into executive session, legalese for shut the doors, call the lawyers, and let's remember what our job is. We waited. People whispered. Mrs. Silverman squeezed my shoulder and said, "Nice control on the corners." When they returned, the board chair's face wore the expression of a person who has realized the hole is deeper than the shovel. "In light of serious allegations supported by preliminary documentation," she said, reading carefully, "the board is placing Principal Davenport on immediate administrative leave pending a full, independent audit and investigation." A murmur rolled like thunder. Davenport sputtered something about witch hunts and vendettas. His lawyer touched his arm, which is lawyer for "please stop feeding the fire." Anna stood up so fast her chair scraped. "You can't do this," she said. "You're ruining a good man's career because some coach collected photocopies and hurt feelings." The chair didn't look at her. "Mrs. Sanders," she said, "our decision is about procedures and records, not personalities. We will follow the facts." I didn't plan what I did next. If I had, I might have done it less clean. "Since we're following facts," I said, "I have one more, and I wish I didn't. Some of the camera gaps correspond to nights my wife told me she was grading late. Principal Davenport's calendar shows closed-door strategy sessions during that time. I don't offer that to twist the knife. I offer it because personal relationships can be conflicts of interest, and when we talk about integrity we don't get to skip the messy bits." Silence. The suffocating kind. Anna's face went through 4 seasons in 2 seconds. "You unbelievable," she began, then stopped. She grabbed her bag, looked at Davenport, looked at me, and walked out of the auditorium like the hallway was a runway and she'd been booked on a flight called Consequences. The audit took weeks, the kind of weeks that age a community. When it was done, it confirmed what the paper already guessed: improper spending, doctored reports, favoritism and eligibility, a cozy relationship with donors who expected quiet favors, and, because fate is a brutal editor, emails between Davenport and Anna that made it clear strategy sessions involved less policy and more unprofessional collaboration. They fired him. The superintendent did a press conference where he said betrayal of trust 4 times. The district attorney opened a case. Nothing HBO would buy, but real enough to matter. The board terminated Anna for conduct unbecoming and helping falsify reports. The state licensure board opened its own review. When the HR lady called me into her office to tell me, she chose words like a surgeon chooses scalpels. "We are deeply sorry," she said. "Me too," I said, and I was. Not for Davenport. For the idea of my marriage that had lived in my head long after it died in the world. Divorce happened quietly. We split furniture and memories with the surgical care of people who cannot afford to bleed in public. She moved out of town. I didn't ask where. I started sleeping again, in fits, like my heart was relearning its beats. The funny thing about telling kids to play fair is they actually listen. After the meeting, parents stopped me in grocery aisles and said, "Thanks, Coach." Custodians nodded like I joined a club. A dad who once screamed at me for pulling his kid after 2 errors shook my hand so hard it clicked. More surprising, teenagers kept sidling up and saying things like, "Coach, that was cool," in tones that suggested they'd stumbled into respecting an adult and were still recovering. The season rolled on. We lost games we should have won and won a couple we had no business winning because baseball is physics plus faith. At the banquet, the freshman gave me a framed photo of our beat-up dugout with a Sharpied quote underneath, "Play fair, or don't play at all. Coach Sanders." I hadn't said it that neatly, but I appreciated the editing. I also realized something standing at that podium, choked up, holding a plaque with my name spelled right for once. There were more kids to teach than a high school could hold. Idea hit like a line drive, a youth academy. Not the fancy travel ball kind that sells exposure like a miracle drug. A place that teaches fundamentals, character, and why you don't lie on your stats or your taxes. A place where scholarships outweigh swagger. A place that tells 10-year-olds the truth: this game doesn't define you, but it can refine you. I'm not a business guy. I'm a man who gets excited about a well-raked infield. But I know people. The Booster Club treasurer helped me write a plan. Mrs. Silverman did bylaws because of course she did. The custodian found us a cheap lease on a warehouse with high ceilings and potential. The parents painted. The kids hauled nets and pretended it was CrossFit. My brother-in-law built an L screen that looks like it could stop a truck. We hung a sign. Playfair Academy. Honest reps. Honest stats. Honest game. First week, a dozen kids showed up in mismatched cleats, eyes wide, gloves stiff. We taught stances, not swagger. When a kid cheated his push-ups, I didn't yell. I told a story about a principal, a ledger, and a town that decided the scoreboard means nothing if the numbers are lies. 10-year-olds like stories. So do we all. We offer sliding scale tuition because I remember what it felt like to not have $20 for a clinic. We keep a jar labeled equipment fund. People put in more than they take. We post the books in the lobby on a corkboard monthly because I will never again be part of a place where money hides in adjectives. On Saturdays, we do chapel, which is what we call 15 minutes of life talk before batting practice. We cover things like how to apologize, why to drink water, how to tell a friend the truth kindly, when to take a pitch, and what to do when someone powerful wants you to play dirty. I don't say Davenport's name. I don't have to. Sometimes, late, when the lights go dim and the L screens lean like tired guards, I sit on a bucket and listen to the quiet that comes after a good kind of tired. The academy smells like leather and effort. My hands are calloused and clean. There's a little office up front where a plaque hangs crooked because I hung it myself. It says, Playfair Academy. Founded by Coach Mike Sanders. Because the win that sticks is the one you earn. I still teach at the high school. They asked me to stay. I said yes, because the kids on that field deserve a man who shows up. Sometimes a freshman will whisper, "Is it true you got the principal fired?" And I'll say, "No. His choices got him fired." I just pointed at the plate. A reporter came by once to do a piece on the academy. She asked for a quote. I said, "Baseball's a great game because it teaches you how to lose right and win honest." Everything else I needed to know, I learned by raking the dirt. She wrote it down like it was profound. Maybe it is. As for Anna, people ask sometimes if I'd do anything differently. I'd love to say I could have saved us. Truth is, you can't coach someone out of a game they want to play. You can only decide which game you're playing. The day we opened the academy, the first kid through the door tripped over the threshold and fell flat on his face. He looked up at me, horrified, waiting for the world to end. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded, sniffling, eyes shiny. "Good," I said, offering a hand. "Welcome to baseball." He laughed. We got to work. Every so often, a parent will pull me aside and whisper thank you like we're in church. I tell them they don't owe me thanks. I tell them we're just trying to build a place where the scoreboard means something because we do. Where you don't lie on the books or to your team. Where kids go home dirty and proud. We end every practice the same way I ended my speech at that board meeting, didn't plan it that night, It just came out and stuck. Two things, I say, as the kids crowd around, cleats clicking on concrete. 1. Take care of your people. 2. Play fair. They clap once on fair. It sounds like a promise. I lock up, the sign humming soft in the early dark. My life didn't turn into a movie. It turned into something better, a dugout full of names I'll never forget in a field where the lines are straight because we keep them that way. Could have been just Coach Sanders, the guy who waved a bat and looked away. Instead, I taught the only game worth playing the only way I know how. Honest. Thank you for listening my story. If you want more raw, real, and gripping stories like this one, subscribe to the AEN Stories channel. Your support keeps these stories alive.